Welcome back to Jacques in the garden. We are now 2 weeks into July and the garden is looking really full. But as many of you at home are also feeling, the garden is also starting to have some of the problems that we really don't like to deal with. I'm talking about disease issues, overgrown plants like this beautiful Cosmo, and today we're going to be tackling some of these things. We're going to be talking about how to trim and prune back your flowers so you could actually get more flowers in the long run. We're going to be removing some plants that are no longer necessary, adding in some late summer plantings because there's definitely still time to get more crops, and a few other things in between, such as diagnosing and dealing with some disease issues that I have present in my garden. So let's kick it off by first talking about how to prune flowers to not only maintain their blooms, but to get more in the long run. First and foremost, I have to tell you what variety this is. This is Sensations Blend from Botanical Interest. It has a mix of colors. I'm really happy it landed on this pink one. I'm usually not a crazy fan of pinkish blooms, but this has a little bit of purple in it. I love the pop of yellow inside and the darker color that's right in the very center of the flower itself. It's been really beautiful, very profuse, flowering like crazy as you could see. But the only reason it's flowering this heavily is because I've been deadheading it. Now, if you're a new gardener or a new flower gardener, the concept of deadheading is this. Basically, when a flower is done, it will start to produce its seeds. And when it's producing its seeds, that actually takes up a lot of energy. Because if you think about any plant, its purpose in existing is to create seed and spread its diversity so it could continue to live. So what we're doing in the process of deadheading is we're removing any of these spent blooms as they happen. And by doing so, we're actually saving a ton of energy for the plant. To produce one of these seeds does take energy, and the plant will lose some ability to bloom and grow because it's so focused on seed production. But if you remove all these spent blooms before it gets a chance to really start maturing those seeds, it will have to develop a new flower because, again, it wants to make seed. So if we take away all its seed, it will simply bloom more to create more seed. So that is the process of deadheading, and by doing so, you extend your flower cycle and the amount of flowers you get dramatically. That is the only reason it's actually blooming so much and it has so many blooms is because I've been deadheading it now for 3 months. Now at this point, it's also spread and taken over a big chunk of my garden. I actually forgot that I even had a pepper planted in here, which I just saw. So we're gonna do some sculpting here, paring this down a little bit, maybe adding a few stakes. But I also want to point out that you don't have to do this. You can let this ride. It'll just start to produce less and less blooms, and the seeds are actually great for birds that like to eat those. I actually caught a little bird yesterday, I don't remember which one it was, pecking at all these seeds, pulling them out and snacking on them. So there's always a benefit to leaving things in your garden if you don't need to remove it. But in this case, it's actually taking over my garden bed and I need a little bit more space. So let's do some strategic pruning here and I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. But first, let me show you what you want to do when you're pruning back something like a Cosmo. So if you look here, here's the spent bloom. Now, of course, you could just cut it right here, but now you're going to have this random stem that's never going to produce anything. So instead, what you want to do is take the stem, trace it down until you hit a branching point where you see this leaf. That's where you want to cut it right above the leaf. Now what's going to happen is that this leaf node is going to be where a new branch will form. So if I pull another one over here like this, you could see right in there is the leaf node, and that's where the branch forms. That is going to be what happens every single time. So right here, another one, you can even see the baby bloom right there. So that is what you're going for. You want to prune it back all the way until you hit another leaf junction. I started by clearing out the areas around the pathway, and some of the sections I just took a big old chunk and cut right through it. As for the rest of it, I walked around and tried to prune back to that nearest leaf node as much as I could. And I decided in the process I would leave a few of these spent dead heads behind so that the birds could continue to snack and forage from those flowers. But overall, even though we're reducing this a whole bunch, we're creating a lot of new branching sites that should pay dividends in the future. In probably 2 to 3 weeks, this thing will be covered in brand new blooms and it's going to look absolutely incredible once again. As I was going around pruning, I looked inside and noticed that one of these branches was already snapped near the stem. It had gone too heavy for its positioning and basically just broke. So I decided to finish the job and we'll go ahead and remove this. Now at first I was kind of sad because this is actually a very substantial part of this Cosmo bush. You could see right here, that's quite a bit of it. But there's still plenty left on here, and what this does is it actually frees up this bottom area for me to now plant in that was basically overrun with this Cosmo. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the job here by pruning back any of these other branches that are also crowding this area, and now we have a new space that we could plant into. So now that we have this new space opened up, let's go over to my seedling table and see what we could go ahead and slot in here. I'm pretty sure I have some more green chard, and this one it's been a little bit weird. So maybe we'll remove this one and go ahead and just replant this whole section. It's time to go shopping from the best local nursery, and that is my seedling table. And as you can see, I still have quite a bit of stuff here. Now, these were started not too long ago, and you might notice that I have some tomatoes in here. This is all according to that video I made earlier this year, which was my tomato strategy. And the strategy was to have backups and have more plants later in the season so that I could cycle them in as other plants start to get beat up, tired, or covered in disease. And that's where we are today in July. We're starting to see some more disease. More on that later. But for now, what I want to do is I want to definitely grab this chard. We'll plant that underneath the Cosmo we just cleared. I'm going to grab some cucumbers. You'll see where that goes in a moment, as well as some summer squash. Now, these are all plants that are vegetables, so let's get something to also brighten up the area. Now back here, I believe, let's see which one this is. Oh, that is the one from Flower Farms. Let's put that somewhere else. Here we go. I've got the Thumbelina zinnia. Thumbelina zinnia and also the dwarf double Zahara. These are ones that don't get that big. So you know how that Cosmo got absolutely gigantic? I don't want to create another giant flower problem, so I'm going to grab these dwarf ones and you'll see exactly how I plant them. Sometimes the plan has to change, and that's exactly what's happening here. As I mentioned, we did grab this Swiss chard here to replant in this bed. And I mentioned that one of the chards in the middle here, this one, was actually not performing too well, and so I would remove it, and I just yanked it, and what did I find? See how it has all these bumps and nodules and swells? All of this is root knot nematode. So now they're attacking my chard and my beets, I guess, anything in that family. I haven't checked any tomatoes yet, but we will be pulling a tomato soon here. So this is a bad sign, and it's also a sign that I have to practice crop rotation. So if I go ahead and just put this chard right back in the ground here, it's gonna get root knot nematode again. There's no chance I did pull all the roots. There's for sure more root knot nematodes in there. So what we're going to do is we're gonna pivot. I'm gonna set this aside, we'll plant it elsewhere. That's totally fine. And instead, I found a couple more peppers I had on my back seedling table. The one that I purchased at a nursery about a week or two ago, which is a Thai hot pepper, because I realized I had none growing in my garden, and I have all this delicious Thai basil. And how could I have delicious Thai basil without a delicious hot Thai pepper? And then over here, these are just 3 bell peppers that I potted up a while back. They look really good, so we might as well get them in the ground. And this is already a pepper bed, so we might as well extend it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to plant them roughly a little bit more than the spacing I did earlier. I'm going to be aiming more towards something like a full foot between plants instead of 9 to 10 inches, because I think this year they seem to be growing so well that the tight spacing I did is actually a little bit too tight. So for now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to give a hearty scoop of fertilizer to each one of these plants, because this has been a garden bed active all spring and summer long, and it's going to be slightly depleted of nutrients. So what I'm going to do though is to avoid getting the pest digging it all up, which has been happening, is I'm going to scatter it, and then I'm going to really blend it into the soil and the surrounding area. What this is going to do, hopefully, is discourage the pest from digging up a big ol' pile of fertilizer that I could munch on. These are things like raccoons, maybe possums, skunks, things like that, that love to munch on all this organic fertilizer. So by spreading it out, we're going to make it a lot harder for them to find it and less enticing for them as well, because they don't want to go around eating individual grains. They just want to find a big old pile of fertilizer and chomp right into it. So I'm going to get these planted. We'll move over to the next bed where I'll show you where we're putting the chard and also replacing an entirely different plant. The solution to my chard problem is right over here. Now it is really close to where I did have that issue with the root knot nematodes, but over here I was growing lettuce. I've been slowly pulling it, and it's been mostly free now. I still have a couple heads down there still developing, and this is just enough space to squeeze in for chard plants. So I'm gonna space them out at 18 inches apart, and actually, at the end of this video, I'll show you what I do to prevent any future root knot nematode issues, or at least hopefully, because it's something I've tried in the past, but it should work. And now for another quick plant replacement. Over here, I have my squash that's looking not good. It's had better days. The one next to it, for comparison, is looking much more vibrant and alive, has nice big leaves and looks normal, but these are tiny and pathetic leaves. Now, I know exactly what happened here. I actually still have a gopher/vole problem. I might have eliminated all of them in my yard at the time, but my neighbor is actually renting out his place, and the tenants there are doing absolutely nothing to control the problem. And now they're moving from their yard into my yard once again. So this whole area got ravaged. A lot of plants got lost, especially in the front there. And all of these roots have been entirely munched on. So let's go ahead and pull this out. and I'll show you what we're working with. So that's all the roots that we have left on this plant. I honestly can't even tell what happened here. Looks like maybe the bottom got entirely chewed out, but essentially the plant suffered. It couldn't grow properly. It has no leaves, and it's time for it to go. So now that old zucchini is out of the way, what I'm going to do is just clear out this hole here, and we're going to be planting in this new one. Now it is summer, so the cool thing about that is that everything like a summer squash will grow tremendously quickly, as I mentioned before. So it is a young seedling. It's not that big right now, but I'm not worried. It'll catch up in no time, especially with this humidity and summer heat we're having. I'll also be sure to give it plenty of this Happy Frog all-purpose, which has a lot more nitrogen. So it should help it leaf out a little bit sooner here. And hopefully we'll be off to the races and harvesting squash in no time. And another thing that's great to plant in the middle of summer is your cucumbers. Cucumbers absolutely thrive in the heat. And honestly, they don't transplant that well. At least they stunt a little bit at transplantation. So we'll see how this goes. These are pretty big already, but considering it's nice and warm, the soil is already heated up, I think they'll do just fine. Now, what we're going to be doing though, is removing a tomato. Now, if you take a close look at this plant, you'll see that it is kind of dying. It's covered in powdery mildew. The very tip of it is growing, but not really growing that well. Now, part of me is a little bit fearful that there might be a root knot nematode issue in here as well, which would really truly be unfortunate. But the other thing that's going on here is that I've taste tested all of my early tomatoes, as I mentioned in the last video. Glacier is already out, and now my new consensus is that Early Girl and Moscovich, they're okay. Moscovich is pretty useful if you want a larger size tomato that's early season as well, but New Girl over here on my right is the most flavorful from the ones that I've grown so far. So moving forward, I'll probably only keep New Girl, and at this point I have so many tomatoes in the garden, I don't really need ones that are substandard compared to the rest. So we're going to be removing the Early Girl and the Moscovich, and we're going to be planting a cucumber in its place. So now we've got those tomatoes out of the way, and one thing I'll mention is that I do have this French marigold here, which is supposed to help with root knot nematode, but the main way that it's supposed to help is that you're supposed to chop it up and till it into the soil. So I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut some of these lower branches that are kind of blocking the light anyway from a young cucumber plant, and I'm going to chop them up and just jam them into the holes where the tomatoes were originally planted, and then I'll plant my cucumbers just around that area. Now, I don't know if it's the same root knot nematode that affects cucumbers that also gets your tomatoes, but this should help reduce the population at least a little bit for the time being, and maybe even knock out some of that population that's already in the soil right now. So I just went to town chopping up a handful of that marigold, and now what I'm going to do is shove it into the holes where the tomatoes were, and later the irrigation should run tonight. And what you want to do is whenever you're burying something like this, especially to deal with an issue, you actually really want it to decompose as fast as possible. And what that means is that you definitely want to water it before, or water it while it's buried. So the irrigation should help take care of that. But now we'll see if this does anything. I have no idea if this will work. The only way to find out is to grow tomatoes again and see if they have the problem. Now that our marigold is buried, chopped up, and hopefully fighting off nematodes, let's get these cucumbers transplanted. And like I said, we're gonna go right next to the tomato plant, but not on top of that marigold, because as the marigold's rotting, that is going to take up some nutrients, and you don't really want to plant right onto that. When I'm outside working on the garden, pruning, trellising, and harvesting tomatoes day after day, I want to be as comfortable as I possibly can, which is why I got myself some Bombas socks, the sponsor of today's video. Their socks feature a seamless toe box so you never get annoying rubbing, and their sure fit cuff guarantees that your sock is going to stay exactly where you leave it all day long. And if you wear boots all day in the garden, you'll definitely appreciate their merino wool blend quarter length socks. The natural wicking ability of merino wool keeps my feet dry and breezy instead of hot and steamy. And don't worry if these aren't your style, because they carry a wide variety of colors, materials, and lengths to fit whatever your needs are. But it doesn't stop at socks, because they also make underwear and t-shirts, and those three items are the most requested at any homeless shelter, which fits perfectly into Bombas' missions of helping those in need, because for every purchase you make, an equivalent will be donated to those in need. And so far, they've donated over 150 million articles of clothing to those who need it. So if you want to feel comfortable while doing good, use my code Jacques for 20% off your first purchase from Bombas. And thanks again for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the garden. Now it's time for a fun, quick side quest. What I'm going to do here is tighten up the Shasta daisy until it's a very dense sort of mass. And we're going to chop it and see if we can get a second bloom from it out of the same year. Now, here in San Diego, my climate is very long and it's very mild. When I say it's a long climate, that doesn't actually mean anything. What I meant to say it's a long season and basically just doesn't get that cold. So I think there's probably a good chance that I could force this to flower one more time. Now what we're going to do is I have a stake back here. All I'm doing is I'm looping the extra twine around and around until it gets nice and tight. And now I'm gonna take this hedge trimmer. I'm just gonna and just cut it right out the top. And we'll see. If anything, it should look a little bit cleaner just because of the fact that it's mostly dead flowers now anyway. So we'll see. I'll let you guys know in the future if this actually worked. Honestly, it doesn't look amazing, but if it does bloom again, I'll take it. And if you didn't know, Shasta daisies are pretty intense. They can grow very vigorously and spread and be aggressive. So actually even just doing that should remove some of the chance of those seeds germinating across my garden. I have to say that so far this year has been pretty decent with the peppers. At least right now I'm getting a lot of really good yields on these plants. But I'm also starting to see some issues, not everywhere in the garden with the peppers, but some places. Now, the thing that I'm seeing are spots on the leaves. So right there, you could see some of it over here. And now the problem here is that this could either be a bacterial spot or it could just be pepper leaf spot, both of which are diseases, either fungal or bacterial. And so while a spray might be the solution here, one of the things that I've seen for peppers is to give them extra phosphorus and potassium. Those are the things that are usually in flower and fruit fertilizers. So I got some liquid fertilizer, we're gonna mix it up and we're gonna just try to dose these plants. Fertilizing them should help them anyway, should help produce more yield, but should also help give them all the nutrients and power that they need to push through this disease. Because I've noticed that as these peppers have aged, they're actually starting to get a little bit better. So I do feel optimistic that it's not going to just wipe out my crop here, but I want to be proactive as best that I can. So let's grab some liquid fertilizer, mix it up, and we're gonna give this bed a nice drink. So now I've got my bucket all mixed up with the fertilizer ready to go. And the first couple, I'm gonna just dip my can in here, even though it's gonna get on my hand, and take one for the team because it's a little easier at the beginning. So what I'm going to do here is do about 5 seconds on each plant. I'd say it's probably about a quarter gallon per plant, the way I'm dosing it. So at this point, it's around 3 o'clock and I am tired from being out in the sun and the heat of it. So what we're going to do is we're gonna check back in about 2 to 3 hours, around 5 o'clock. And we're going to be doing a couple things. We're gonna be applying root knot nematodes directly to the plants because I just spoke to a tomato farmer recently in San Diego, and this is basically what he recommends. I'm also going to show you how I like to spray the plants. And both of those activities are things that you do not want to do in full sunlight, which is why we're gonna wait until a little bit later in the evening. It's about 5:30 and it's a good time to get started on this process. Now, I think I alluded to it earlier, but what we're doing is applying beneficial nematodes. Now, this is just one that I found at my local garden center, Walter Anderson, and it has 7 million. So this is a smaller quantity than the one that I've ordered before from Arbico Organic online. But the reason why I got this one is because A, it's local, so it's very easy for me to get. To keep it in a refrigerator, so I know that the product's good, because these are live creatures in here. Nematodes are little microscopic critters that live in the soil, and the beneficial kinds are selected specifically for the ones that target garden pests. So when I'm saying garden pests, I'm saying things like Japanese beetles, fig eater beetles, cutworms, even ground-dwelling beetles that are bad for your garden. Anything that you could think of that's a pest, there's a specific nematode that targets it, they select them, they breed them, and they package them up for us. Now the way this one works is that the nematodes are inside this, what looks like a kind of mineral substance, maybe like a clay aggregate kind of thing. And what we do here is we take the substance and we put it inside this cloth bag. So I'm gonna set this down for a second, open this bag. And what we're going to do is right now we're waking up the nematodes. So they're essentially dormant because this has been kept in the refrigerator. So we're gonna put it in this bag. We're gonna dump it in. We're gonna tie it off. I'm gonna put it in the bucket, fill it with water, and then we're going to put them in there and agitate constantly. Now this agitation is gonna make sure that they're not like settling and staying in there. We want them to go from this into the water itself. So I'm going to just tie a loose little bow here, something that I could untie easily, but we don't want any of that chunky stuff to fall out just because it might make it harder to apply them basically. Now we're going to be adding about 3 gallons of water in here. That's what the directions say. Now what I'm doing here is every once in a while, I'm going to pick this up, squeeze it. I want to agitate it, make sure that any of the nematodes in there aren't like settling into one spot. We want to get them into the water. We're going to let this sit for about an hour, and ever so often we're going to come by, give it a stir, give it a squeeze, and that should help get those nematodes out and into the solution. Now, while this is soaking, we're gonna go into the spraying. I mentioned earlier that I was using the potassium bicarbonate, so let me show you exactly how to use that. And now that I know that the powdery mildew is serious and I can't mess around anymore, I'm going to be doing it on a weekly basis to just try to get this locked down, make sure I can get through the rest of the summer without losing any plants. When it comes to the spray, we're going to be using something that is organic, something that isn't broad spectrum, that's going to just kill everything. And in that case, we're going to be using the potassium bicarbonate. Now, earlier I mentioned it's not a perfect solution, but it does work. And right now, what I really want to do is slow down the spread of powdery mildew, and this is the perfect solution to do just that. Because again, it's going to make a basic environment on the surface of the plant. So in the morning when I get that overcast kind of humid air, hopefully the powdery mildew won't be able to breed. Instead, it'll just die. Now, the other ingredient that we're going to be using is a Castile soap. I like to use the Dr. Bronner's peppermint. This is something that I've been using for well over a decade now. They're a San Diego company. The reason why I've always used it is because I used it camping, because it's something that's considered safe in the environment. It doesn't harm anything else, which again is another great reason to use it here. Now, in the past, I've had a standard kind of little pump can sprayer, but I've decided that finally it's time for me to upgrade to a bigger one. This is a 4-gallon one that has a little lever that you pump. And the cool thing about this is that, first of all, it's 4 gallons, which is a lot more than my old one. And it's really annoying to have to constantly mix up new solution. It's also really annoying to carry around that little 1-gallon thing and spray stuff. Whereas this one's just on my back, which helps me mix it as I spray, and I don't have to carry anything around. Now, the ratio for this is going to be 1 tablespoon of potassium bicarbonate, 1 teaspoon of Castile soap per gallon of water. So for this is 4 gallons. I'm gonna just go ahead and do the whole thing. And we're gonna spray my tomatoes, my squash, even my peppers that had that little bacterial or fungal disease, my grapes, and anything else in between. I'm going to avoid anything that's flowering. I don't wanna spray any insects regardless, because they don't wanna be covered in soap and bicarbonate. So we're gonna go ahead, load this up, we'll mix it up, and we'll get to spraying. 4 tablespoons of bicarb and 4 teaspoons of the Castile soap. While this is filling up, I'd love to hear from you guys if you've tried something else that worked for powdery mildew in your garden. There's a lot of different products out there that are organic. I just haven't had the time to really test every single one. One that I have used in the past for a very short period of time was called Regalia, and all that was a fermented plant extract that was supposed to stimulate the plant and stop it from basically being susceptible to disease. It kind of worked, but in this case, I've tried this before. It seems to work pretty well, but I'd love to hear from you guys if you have any other sleeper tips. Make sure you give it a good shake. It will shake the whole time it's on your backpack, which is why I like the backpack sprayer. But we also want to make sure that it's properly mixed. I do want to quickly mention that, of course, this is an extra expense in the garden, but this guy right here I got for $90. The little pumpkin ones you could regularly get for around 30 bucks. If you get a higher quality one like this one, it should last for a very long time. I'm going to keep it in my shed. I'm going to use it for other things like testing out foliar sprays. I've for a long time have been wanting to test out doing things like kelp sprays on plants. So I just figured it's time to invest and get serious if I want to try things like this. So let's go ahead and get this guy on. There's 8 pounds to a gallon of water. So right now we're walking around with 32 pounds on our back, which isn't too bad. And keep in mind that the more you spray, the lighter it's gonna get. So let's get to spraying. So on this leaf, I could see that there's some powdery mildew. There's a couple white splotches here, which means that for sure it's on the underside. And yes, indeed it is. You could probably see it right there. There's a little white discoloration. So the important thing when you're spraying a plant is that you don't wanna just spray the top. You wanna get the bottom. That tends to be where things like pests and diseases actually thrive, out of direct sunlight. So make sure you're always going from beneath and from above at the same time. The way that the potassium bicarbonate works is it creates a basic area on the surface. So by covering as much of the plant as we can, we should reduce the amount of areas that the actual powdery mildew can breed and live in. So you really want to get the entire thing soaked. One of the plants that was actually affected worse by the powdery mildew, it's harder to see on the Cosmo, but the Cosmo is absolutely covered. These tiny little leaves are starting to turn a little bit of white. So I'm going to really drench this entire thing. I'm not going to try to spray the flowers. I don't see any bees right now, but I don't want to risk actually spraying anything, just on the off chance that it doesn't want to get covered in soap. I'm also going to be spraying those freshly planted cucumbers, because cucumbers are definitely susceptible to powdery mildew. And we know that there's powdery mildew in this bed to begin with. And of course, the tomatoes that are left are going to get a very good treatment. I'm going to just go around the entire garden now, spraying everything. Anything that looks like it has mildew, I'm going to cover and soak. And then once I'm done with this, we'll get back to the nematodes. All right, I got everything sprayed and it's time to get back to the nematodes. So what we're going to do is grab this bag one last time, give it a final squeeze. And now any of the stuff that's left in here, I'm gonna just put in my compost pile and hope that there are some nematodes left in there and they'll colonize my compost. And then in the future, I'll be spreading nematodes throughout my yard by just applying compost. Now, you wanna make sure that you are stirring this before you do any application because the nematodes will settle to the bottom. So we wanna give this a very good stir until it's fully in suspension. We're gonna dose it into the watering can just like we did with the fertilizer earlier. And now all I'm going to do is take this watering can, I'm gonna pour it right onto the root ball of the chard and also all of my tomato plants because I wanna make sure that any of the tomatoes that are still in the ground do have some sort of protection. And the way this basically works is that the nematodes in here, which I should constantly keep stirring before I pour, will attack any of the bad nematodes, kill them, and hopefully I will get a healthier plant. So all these things together are the things that I'm focusing on in July to make sure my garden looks fantastic come end of July, come August, and we cruise through the rest of summer. I should be knocking out diseases, removing plants that have no purpose, and basically confronting any issue head on. This is the best time to do it before you get burnt out because everyone knows that as soon as you get into August, the garden can start to feel a little bit tiring. So get ahead of it now, get out there in the garden in July, and I'll see you guys around. Thank you for watching. Good luck in the garden.